Tomorrow sees the first budget since Theresa May entered number 10. It will also be the first budget for Chancellor Philip Hammond. His colleagues call him Box Office Phil, somewhat ironically perhaps, but tomorrow at least he'll get star billing. So, as the house lights go down and the opening music starts up, can we expect a mega budget blockbuster? There will be new cash to build more free schools. Controversially, these schools could be grammars, and there will also be more money to rebuild and refurbish existing schools. Over £1 billion will be pledged to ease the pressure on social care, and there will be an announcement of a review into its funding. Businesses could get more help with up to £300 million extra to help them deal with revalued business rates. And the Chancellor will also pledge £500 million to shake up vocational training, including the introduction of a new T-level qualification. There could also be a few scary scenes for some. The national insurance rate for self-employed workers is expected to rise from 9% to 12%, bringing it into line with rate employees pay. And we could also see an increase in alcohol duties. So what will the critics say? Well, both Labour and the Lib Dems seem to think there should have been a bigger budget. Labour are demanding between 8 and 12 billion extra to help fund the NHS and social care. And the Liberal Democrats have called for an extra 4 billion to fund health and social care. Speaking last night, the Prime Minister said the new schools money was aimed at increasing the opportunity for all children to go to good schools.
Crucially, what we're announcing is £500 million of investment in schools, 320 million of which will be new schools. That will create around 70,000 new school places. What this is about is ensuring that people can know that their child will have a good school place and all the opportunities that that provides for them.
Theresa May there. Well, we're joined now by the Conservative MP, Suella Fernandes. Welcome to the Daily Politics. £320 million for 140 new schools as a one-off payment. Is that right?
I think this is great news.
But is it a one-off payment?
I think that if this is an investment into new school places, which is really
so it's
important.
not every year. That's what I'm trying to establish. It's a one-off £320 million payment for 140 new schools.
Which, as we've heard the Prime Minister say, will create thousands more new school places, which are needed as the population increases. And what's important is that many of those will be free school places. We've seen how the Free School Project has been a success. I founded a free school myself with a team of teachers, local volunteers. I still chair the Board of Governors. And what's fantastic about this is it's locally led, community-driven, and really responds to the needs of an area.
How many of them will be grammar selective schools, do you think?
I hope that many groups will seek to open new grammar schools because
you don't
they
know.
Are popular. No, that's what it's about. It's about choice and it's about freedom. This is not about some kind of prescription which is coming from Whitehall and being imposed down on every town in Britain.
Except it was Theresa May who wanted a new generation of grammar schools. She wanted a more meritocratic society. So 140 new schools with a pot of money that between them isn't going to be very much when you divide it all up is hardly the grammar school revolution that she talked about.
I don't know about that. I think that the ban which was imposed in 1997 on grammar schools will hopefully be lifted. That's what is being proposed, and that will allow the choice to groups to see whether a grammar school is right for that area. And there's lots of other options which are attached to opening grammar schools. We want to see universities open them. We want to see the independent sector open them. We want to have grammar schools have a feeder school from a primary school, which is from an area of disadvantage. This is a really exciting opportunity for our children in the next generation.
Right. I mean, at that point, you may be looking at only 10, 20 grammar schools, so it's hardly anything for the Lib Dems to get too upset about.
I mean, it seems to me a kind of crazy educational experiment which takes away money at a time when things are incredibly tight for Philip Hammond from what's really important. So we know that over the next 3 years there'll be £3 billion taken out of schools' budgets in real terms. I know in my patch that's 625 fewer teachers in Cumbria over the next 3 years, and yet some wonk in the Department for Education who's got a bright idea gets to spend £500 million nearly on something which frankly will add little value.
And that is the point. It's the finances and where they should go. I mean, the National Audit Office has warned of an 8% real terms funding gap for schools up to 2020. So in cash terms, yes, the pot may be getting bigger, but there is an 8% real terms cut. How on earth can that be the way to fund schools of the future?
Well, actually, what we've seen is a protected budget for schools since the Conservatives have been elected. Now, that's very important because despite conditions of austerity and difficult economic conditions, per pupil funding has remained the same. Now, that's really important to allow the creation of new school places. We will need new school places, and that is what this announcement's all about.
But if there's an 8% real terms funding cut to schools funding, even if, as I said, there was an increase in cash terms, you're not taking into account the increase in the number of pupils or, at the moment, rising inflation. So I say again, how can schools be asked to provide the same level of education with more pupils and less money in real terms?
As I've said, the school's budget is actually being protected, and what we're seeing is by allowing more freedom to schools to determine their spending choices, as we've seen in the free school that I chair, we have more cost-effective decisions which are being made on how you recruit, how you use your capital expenditure, how you set your salaries. That's how schools can save on efficiencies and save money and actually be more cost-effective in the long run.
How much more money would you like to see going into the budget?
Well, first of all, you've got a £60 billion budget Brexit war chest, if I can get my words out, that Philip Hammond has established.
It is quite difficult to say,
yes,
although we don't actually know exactly where that's coming from, but I mean, it would be...
Good question, but the point is, as an official part of this budget, I mean, to be very fair to Philip Hammond, we very often talk about there being black holes in budgets. It's not a black hole. He's actually going to put it in the budget. He's going to say there's an amount of money, £60 billion, which is about the Brexit war chest. And so where does the money come from? Well, the government has chosen, and people talk about...
So you'll borrow the money?
No, the government has chosen to set aside £60 billion to pay for the costs of a hard Brexit, i.e. outside the single market. It's set that out. It's been very honest.
No, but hang on, Tim Farron, they're borrowing less, aren't they? They're borrowing less. There's about £12 billion to start with that is going to be used for this Brexit war chest. So in terms of your funding for schools, you would be borrowing that extra money?
No. I mean, the money we're talking about when it comes to Brexit, so you can't have good quality schools or indeed a well-funded NHS and a hard Brexit. It's blindingly obvious. Even Philip Hammond now is stating this by having this £60 billion Brexit war chest. That is there to pay for the cost that even this government admits will happen as a consequence of a hard Brexit. And that is not the result of the referendum. That's the result of a government choice.
Sure,
to take
I understand that, but what we're looking at is what the Liberal Democrats would do in terms of funding some of the promises.
Market, so you wouldn't need the £60 billion.
But taking where we are at the moment, you would be spending that money on schools and hospitals.
Absolutely.
And the borrowing for that would go up. Rightly or wrongly, the borrowing would...
To be clear, there's a £60 billion sum that's going to be put into the budget. Philip Hammond will put it in to pay for a hard Brexit that nobody voted for because it wasn't on the ballot paper. So we would be in the single market. We would therefore not need the £60 billion. You could spend that on health and education.
Well, let's ask Suella Fernandes, where is that £60 billion coming for the war chest for Brexit?
Listen, I think that we are laying the foundations for a strong economy. We're seeing government spending, the deficit's been reduced by 2/3. We're seeing tax receipts come up and
just
increase,
recently,
for
but
example,
where's the £60 billion going to come from?
We're seeing our economy grow significantly, consecutively over all the quarters by 0.6% in the last quarter.
You don't know where the £60 billion is going to come from?
We're getting a strong economy which is providing the foundations for greater public spending like this.
Right, but just on the £60 billion, because it's an awful lot of money, and if the Lib Dems are going to make claims that that's how they would pay for some of their spending commitments, where is that money going to come from?
Well, there are lots of, as I say, we have been, the economy is in a very strong position.
Right, but that doesn't answer the question, and actually lots of people would say it's not completely in a strong position when you're looking to try and take out £60 billion.
Well, as I say, we have reduced the deficit. We have cut public spending, borrowing. There are receipts increase, tax receipt increases from, say, the cut in corporation tax, which brought through £43 billion last year alone. I mean, there are lots of great examples of how the government is balancing the books, providing the foundation for a strong economy so that vital investment can be made into our public services, such as schools, such as social care and the NHS.
You've talked about fair taxation. What does that mean?
Well, that's a good question. I think in the end, it's about making sure that people pay what they can afford.
So tax rises, on whom?
And we take the view that if you're looking at tax rises, then you have to make sure that tax rises are loaded towards those people who have most wealth and indeed most income.
So we're talking about assets and wealth.
Indeed, we don't want tax rises. I mean, and one of the worries I've got at the moment is that the
You've just said you do want to put rises on people who can afford it.
But if you're going to increase taxes, that's what you would do. We've made it clear that it looks like the area where there is a legitimate, strong case for there to be a form of tax increase and indeed a new form of taxation is one which is ring-fenced for health and social care. Politicians will all agree that our National Health Service is of immense importance, that social care is enormously important and is in crisis. And yet no one will come up with more than a sticking plaster solution to get through this. And we took the view that, William Beveridge wrote that report back in the 1940s, which underpinned the National Health Service. So
what are your proposals today to fund that gap?
We would find £4 billion in this budget to make sure that you deal with social care, mental health and A&E and hospital waiting times for this year.
Right, and you would put that on tax rises?
That can only, no, not in this year. We would take that from the 60 billion that the government doesn't need to be putting in a Brexit war chest.
Sure. OK, well, going forward then, let's talk a little bit more about who you're going to put those tax rises on, because people will want to know. If it's on wealth and assets, what level of wealth are you talking about?
So, first of all, what we're doing at the moment is we have an expert panel that Norman Lamb, my Liberal Democrat health spokesperson colleague, has set up, which includes people like David Nicholson, Claire Gerarda, leading experts in health and social care. They are attempting to do, if I can state it so grandly, to do a Beveridge for the 21st century, to put together a plan for health and social care to offer to the British people as a new deal, a new contract. Amongst the things that will be coming from those proposals is very likely to be a hypothecated ring-fenced tax. I don't want to jump the gun and make up policy on the back of a fag packet.
So you'd have a hypothecated health tax?
But I think that's one of the options we will be looking at. I certainly think that if the only way we can afford to have the best health and social care in this country is to ask people to pay a little more, then we should be honest enough and straightforward enough with the British people to do so.
What do you think of that, Suella Fernandes? I mean, bearing in mind, if you look at social care, it's lost a tenth of its budget since 2010. More than 5,000 care beds have been lost in the past 18 months. We know that there are more people growing older who are going to live an awful lot longer. Do you agree that the system is on the verge of collapse?
Well, first of all, on the budget, I think that we have ring-fenced NHS spending when we got elected in 2015. And what that means in real terms is £4 billion investment this year, £10 billion by 2020. That's, again, only possible because we've been prudent with our fiscal arrangements in this country.
About 8 months ago.
But that just allows us to show what we have achieved with that. We've achieved 10,000 more doctors, 6,000 more nurses.
Yes, but it still doesn't say why social care has lost almost a tenth of its budget since 2010.
So I agree there are pressures on social care. We're seeing there are 1 million more people who are over 65 than there were in 2010. Last year alone, there were 23 million admissions more to A&E. Again, an increase on 2010. So there are pressures, and I'm sure that the Chancellor will look at these pressures and take that into account in his announcement tomorrow.
Suella Fernandes, thank you.